Good evening, ladies. In today's video, I want to talk about the greatest token that has ever been invented or created in the entire crypto economy, and that, of course, is Hyperliquid. And hopefully you've been respecting the pump over the last couple of months, and you've let the pump into your life, because Hyperliquid has not stopped pumping this. Anyway, let's move on. Anyway, I'm dead serious. I do think Hyperliquid is the greatest token to ever come out of the crypto economy, and I will explain why. So this video is just going to be bullish propaganda about Hyperliquid, but if you haven't watched my previous video on where I gave the fundamentals of Hyperliquid, why, and the price target, I highly recommend you watch that. This video we're going to get a bit nerdy. We're going to get a bit deeper into the weeds of how basically everything in the Hyperliquid economy and the Hyperliquid ecosystem benefits directly the Hype token. Either it forces people to stake a big amount of supply of Hyperliquid, it burns a lot of Hyperliquid, it buys back a lot of Hyperliquid, etc, etc. Like every single, and there's so many different moving parts, but every moving part in this economy benefits the Hype token. So it's really, really interesting. So we're going to go through all of those in today's video. And if you remember, over the last couple of years, the reason the whole meme coin super cycle happened was in retaliation to predatory tokenomics from VCs who just did these VC slop tokens, layer 2 garbage coins that no one fucking wanted, and they would release them at huge FTVs and they would just dump them onto retail, and people just people woke up and just realized, okay, this isn't worth $2 billion and the tokenomics is garbage. Hyperliquid completely inverted that model and has now set a new standard for tokenomics in crypto, and I don't know if any token's ever going to have the same sort of elite tokenomics that Hyperliquid has, but it's really set a new standard that other crypto tokens can follow in the future, which I hope is going to happen. Okay, let's get straight into the bullish propaganda. This is just going to be, I'm just going to keep firing crazy bullish things about Hyperliquid at you that you probably didn't realize already and that I haven't talked about previously. We'll start off with the most simple stuff, spot trading. So I don't think there's much point comparing Hyperliquid to other perp dexes, because it's completely in a league of its own in the amount of revenue it's generating and what it actually is. So a better thing to compare it to is a centralized exchange such as Binance, because that's kind of the target that Hyperliquid is going after, and potentially even flipping that someday. Obviously, the main focus of Hyperliquid for the last year is being a perp dex, so trading perpetual futures. But now they've just started the spot market, and they've just brought out a native spot market for various crypto assets. Obviously, it has all its like core Hyperliquid assets as spot, like Hyperliquid coins, but now it's integrating other coins in the crypto economy. So it has native Bitcoin. This is all through the unit protocol. So it has native Bitcoin, meaning you can deposit Bitcoin into Hyperliquid and you can sell the Bitcoin on Hypercore, and you could buy Bitcoin spot on Hypercore. So it has Bitcoin, Solana, Farcoin, and Ethereum. Why do I think the spot market is so interesting? Okay, first of all, Binance is the biggest company in crypto. It probably makes the most money out of any crypto company or crypto protocol. Or it's one of the biggest outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum maybe. It makes about $20 to $30 billion a year. Hyperliquid currently makes $1 billion per year, basically just from its perp dex. And I think, the perp dex revenue is going to increase over time. So by the end of the year, it could be running at a 2 or 3 billion run rate. So when people are talking about the spot opportunity for Hyperliquid, they're like, okay, Binance, about 20 to 30% of its volume is spot. So that's going to be like a 20 to 30% boost for Hyperliquid's revenue if it, same, if it captures the same amount of volume in comparison to the perp volume on Hyperliquid. It would be like a 20% boost. However, when you actually look into it, 70% of the revenue from Binance is from the spot market. Even though it only makes 20 to 30% of the volume, it's actually like 70% of the revenue. So I'm not going to say like the spot volume is going to be 1.5 times higher than the perp volume straight away, but I think people are grossly underestimating how bullish a healthy spot market on Hyperliquid could be. So, and if you do want to farm that, you know, you can deposit Solana, you can deposit Bitcoin, you can trade these assets spot. And I think that's probably a really, really good way to farm the next airdrop if it happens, if/when it happens. I'm pretty sure it will happen eventually. I think that's one of the best ways, because I think they really want to incentivize a strong spot market on Hyperliquid. Obviously, the perps opportunity still has a huge amount of runway to grow. Still only like, you know, 10 to 20% of Binance's volume, or of the total perp market share volume. And perps, as Ryan Watkins so eloquently puts it, is one of the greatest innovations that crypto has ever produced. So if you don't know how a perp works, essentially, if, let's say, the price of a perp for Hyperliquid is $21, but the spot price is $20, the people who are longing Hyperliquid have to pay a funding rate to incentivize people to short Hyperliquid to bring it back to the spot price, to bring it back in the line, and obviously vice versa. So people are heavily incentivized to bring the perp price in line with the spot price. And you can actually take advantage of these funding rates very easily in Hyperliquid. This is what I've been doing, because the funding rate for Hyperliquid and the funding rate for Per, the main meme coin on Hyperliquid, has been like 100% or 200% recently. So all you have to do is buy Hyperliquid spots, so say buy $1,000 worth of Hyperliquid and short $1,000 worth of Hyperliquid on the perp. So buy 1,000 spot, short $1,000 perp, and then you're just going to get 100% APY until the gap narrows. The nice thing about this is, obviously you're getting really good APY, pretty much risk-free, like pretty close to risk-free for that kind of return. But on top of that, you're also adding to the volume that you're generating in Hyperliquid. So whenever the next airdrop does come, you'll have a bit more volume, and that will boost your airdrop. On top of this, all the centralized exchanges have either started or are going to list Hyperliquid soon. So it's going to be much easier for people to finally buy Hyperliquid without having to go through the entire bridging process. But on top of that, the sexes have to actually go out and market buy Hyperliquid, so they have liquidity on their own exchanges for people to actually buy it. So that's a little more bullish catalyst. The other reason that Hyperliquid has this up-only chart is, like I said, the tokenomics means that there was no VCs, not really any insiders who were interested in dumping all their tokens. The main people holding these tokens are retail degens like myself, or the airdrop receivers. And I feel like a lot of the airdrop receivers they're either real believers in Hyperliquid, or they've sold a lot of their airdrop or all of their airdrop, or a combination of both. They've like taken out what they wanted to take out, or they're heavy believers in Hyperliquid, and a combination of those. So that gives, like, when tokens are held by retail, they tend to pump a lot harder than when they're held by VCs who have mandates to return profits to their LPs or whatever. Okay, so let's go into some of the more technical aspects of the Hyperliquid flywheels. First, we're going to talk about HIP 3, Hyperliquid Improvement Proposal 3. So essentially what this does, it allows anyone to auction for the opportunity to list a perp on Hyperliquid. And the only way you can auction for a place to list a perp on Hyperliquid is if you have 1 million Hyperliquid staked. So that's what, $43 million worth of Hyperliquid. You have to have that staked or have access to that to be able to auction for the right to list a perp. So firstly, obviously there's going to be a huge amount of buy pressure in order to have $1 million, 1 million hype. So $43 million worth of hype, or 40 million, whatever it is right now. So that's a lot of buy pressure, and that's going to be staked. And as long as the perp is there, as long as the perp is making whoever owns that 1 million hype staked, as long as that perp is making them good money, that's like essentially burned supply. That's a huge amount. That's like 0.1% of the supply burned. On top of that, the auction fees are in Hyperliquid, in Hype token, and I believe they're burned as well, or they're bought back by the assistance fund. One or the other. It doesn't really matter. It's essentially burned as well, those auction fees. Yeah, I just checked. The auction proceeds are burned actually. So the people who have the 1 million, let's say the company that stakes 1 million Hype, they are very much incentivized, or they're aligned with Hyperliquid because they own a big supply of it. So they're not going to be doing stuff that's too dodgy. If they try and do dodgy things like manipulate their perp, they can get their 1 million Hype slashed, and that will be burned supply as well if they're trying any funny things. So the auction, basically what happens is people are going to like auction up to be able to list the perps that they think will make the most money, and the perps that will make the most money are the perps that people want the most. So stuff like S&P 500, NASDAQ, what other perps that aren't on Hyperliquid yet? You kind of get the idea. Maybe gold or something like that. So they're going to auction to be able to list the best perps that they can in order to generate the most fees. And they will retain 50% of the fees generated from that perp, and the other 50% going to Hyperliquid and being essentially burned as well, going to the assistant fund. So you can see how this aligns the customer, it aligns Hyperliquid, and it aligns the company that wants to list the perp. It aligns them all together, and every single, like you've seen in that one improvement proposal, I think it's like 4 different ways Hype is going to get burned or something like that. And this is just us getting started. This is, how they've just designed it all very, very well, as you can see. There's also HIP1, which has been in effect for a good while, and that's just to list a spot asset on the Hyperliquid core. So it's not like listing Bitcoin spot. It's like listing, some meme coin on a hyper core. And that's also an auction that's burned as well. But that's a good bit smaller, but it's still quite interesting as well. It's another little sync that we should mention. I've mentioned this before, but the Hyperliquid staking tiers are live. This is another sync for Hyperliquid in the fact that if you want, well, it's not a sync, but it removes Hype from the circulating supply. Like if you're a high frequency trading firm, you're definitely going to want to be in the highest tier of staking tier in order to get the highest reduction in fees, because you're trading a lot, like big size, frequently. So that's another, or if you're just, a leverage trader who does a lot of leverage trading, you're probably going to want to accumulate some Hype to, first of all, you think Hype's going to go up, so you want to have it staked, and you're going to be earning 2% annually on your stake. And on top of that, you're going to get reduced fees. And obviously, the fees on Hyperliquid are super cheap, but, they're cheap in comparisons to centralized exchanges, but they still generate a shitload of revenue. So being able to reduce those fees by buying a lot of Hyperliquid, it's a good deal for anyone who's leverage trading a lot. The next thing we're going to talk about is called builder codes. So this essentially allows you to build on top of Hyperliquid's liquidity, and you can build some sort of trading app, or we'll talk about what you could build, but you can build anything and tap into Hyperliquid's liquidity using builder codes, and you can charge up to 1% on fees on whatever people are trading using Hyperliquid trading as the backend. Now, you might think, why is anyone going to use a product when they can just use Hyperliquid directly? But I'll give you an example. Like in many jurisdictions, basically every centralized exchange, like let's say like small jurisdictions like, I don't know, New Zealand or something, they probably have an exchange, New Zealand Bitcoin exchange. They're not using their own order book. They're using Binance's order book a lot of the time. Like these small exchanges, their order book's going to be too thin. So they'll pay Hyperliquid an enormous amount of fees, or, relatively enormous amount of fees in order to access Binance's liquidity. So it's all about liquidity, and Hyperliquid, obviously, the whole thing is having massive liquidity. So being able to tap into Hyperliquid's liquidity to build any sort of application on top of, and charge up to 1% is really, really, really enticing. And it's a lot smaller of a headache than contacting Binance and trying to get some deal going there. So right now, builder codes make up 4% of Hyperliquid volume. So you might have heard of PvP.trade. Essentially, it's a Telegram bot where you can trade and using Hyperliquid on the back end for those trades. So that's what PvP does. And there's other ones like Axiom, another trading bot. You can trade through Axiom, like the Hyper EVM coins and stuff like that, I believe. But it's still very, very early. There's not a huge amount of applications being built on top of Hyperliquid yet, but that's something that will come in the future. It's like basically another analogy you can think of is when Shopify allowed people to create applications that could be integrated into Shopify. So if you've ever set up a Shopify store, you'll know like there's thousands of different applications that you can plug into your store that makes it more enticing to buy shit or whatever. Like, you know, what do they call cross-selling apps and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you know, $15 a month for that application. And it benefits Shopify because it makes the Shopify product better, and Shopify maybe can't build all these applications by themselves, but they're obviously going to get a cut of that revenue being generated by those applications. So same kind of idea with Hyperliquid here. They're allowing people to build on top of Hyperliquid, on top of the liquidity that Hyperliquid offers, to make the Hyperliquid product better and make cool shit on top of Hyperliquid. Oh yeah, going back to the spot market. So we talked about unit briefly and the spot market on Hyperliquid. Obviously they're going to add more spot over time. So right now it's only Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana and Farcoin. So they're going to be adding basically all the top cryptos over time. But the thing I didn't mention is that the fees generated by the spot market that unit are generating obviously are going, well not obviously, but as you can see, they're actually buying Hyperliquid with those fees. So again, another thing for Hyperliquid. Fees. Basically, unit generates fees in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Sol, and as you can see, they're selling them and buying Hyperliquid. So they're T-WAPing out of all the other ones and buying Hyperliquid instead. So again, very aligned. Okay, let's talk about the Hyper EVM. So if you didn't know, there's the Hyper Core chain, which is basically where the Perp DEX hangs out and the Spot DEX hangs out. And then they've attached an EVM chain alongside it. So what makes the EVM stand out from a layer 2 or from Ethereum itself or from any other EVM chain? The fact that it taps into Hyperliquid's liquidity directly, which, you know, it's an absolute game changer. So for example, if you're trading on Base and you want to get liquidity for a token, that's the only liquidity you can access is the liquidity on the Base token. Whereas with Hyper EVM, you can tap into for any sort of DeFi application or for any application with, I think it's called precompiles, something like that. You can basically tap into the liquidity on the order book. You can tap into the, like say for a liquidation on the Hyper EVM, if you need to liquidate an asset, you can use the order book on the Hyper Core to liquidate. So you can sell, let's say you're getting liquidated on your Bitcoin, you can sell that Bitcoin into the liquidity on the Perp DEX on Hyper Core. So it'd be way more liquidity on Hyper Core than, you know, any random layer 2. So it's this integration is really, really useful for DeFi applications. So apart from that, Hyper EVM is just, it's pretty shit. It's just, you know, I never really liked EVM. When you use Solana and then you use an EVM chain, you know, it's just never going to be as good. Well, something like Sonic is really nice, I think. Really, really fast, etc. Anyway, that's beside the point. So the EVM chain itself isn't great in its current form, but the fact that it can access that liquidity is really what the game changer is. And this is the first form of the Hype EVM. So this is just kind of like almost beta. So they're actually going to improve the Hyper EVM over time. I don't think most people realize that. They think that's the final product, and it absolutely isn't. They're going to keep building on it and making it better over time. So that's great to know. So the fact that DeFi applications have access to the Hyper Core means like they're going to be incentivized to build interesting products on the Hyper EVM. And the better the products, the more users that will be using the Hyper-EVM, and more people farming the Hyper-EVM in hopes of getting the next airdrop. So the more fees are being generated, and all the Hyper-EVM fees, which are paid in Hype, are of course burned. So again, another sink for the Hyperliquid token. So as you can see, there's so many different ways that, even outside the perp revenue, which we discussed extensively in my last video, there's so many different mechanisms that go to pumping the price of Hyperliquid. We can see some of them here, and we can see how much Hyperliquid has been burned since inception. So this current circulating supply is about 33%. Another 43%, 42% can be airdropped at some point, and then 24% is held by the team, and 2.4% has been bought back by the assistance fund, and like a tiny amount has been burnt from the Hyper-EVM. So already like 2.5% of the supply, of the total supply, has been bought back or burned, or 7% of the circulating supply. So 2.5% of the total supply, 7% of the circulating supply, and this is only going to grow over time, obviously. So the main idea with crypto, like crypto's main use case, is trading, and Hyperliquid is trying to be the everything exchange. Like apart from, you know, sending money, like transfers, which is also one of the huge use cases for crypto, the other huge use case is trading. And Hyperliquid, like the main bull case with it is that it becomes an everything exchange where you can trade anything. You can trade, you know, stocks, bonds, commodities, crypto, whatever the hell you want. And we can, like, this was potentially a bit of a pipe dream, but we can see now they're actually teasing this already. So someone found this, Unit are testing things. So you can see ES and NASDAQ. So that's S&P 500 and NASDAQ. So they're testing this already. So this is actually going to come. So that's really, really bullish. So Hyperliquid is starting to become a consensus trade for the next few months in crypto, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are still sidelined. There's a lot of funds particularly who are sidelined, not out of choice, but because they don't have the mandates that they're allowed to invest in it yet. So I think at some point this is like one of the best performing coins at, like, with high market cap, with high liquidity. A lot of their LPs are gonna be like, bro, why have you not invested in Hyperliquid? Like, everyone's talking about it and it keeps going up. So they're gonna find a way to get into Hyperliquid as well. So there's a lot of latent capital that can invest in Hyperliquid still. So I do think there's still more upside in Hyperliquid. You know, I talked about my targets already, so we won't go too deep into them, but yeah, there you go. So that's everything for today's video. Really hope you enjoyed, really hope you learned something. Oh, if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't signed up for Hyperliquid, use my referral link. I'll get like 20 cents if you do a bit of volume there, so that would be nice. So thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video. Cheers.